Welcome to Character Analysis, the podcast where I play internet detective and armchair psychologist to help you identify red flags, navigate tricky social situations, and where I analyze human behavior in real life people and in pop culture moments. Before I get into this episode, make sure you're a subscriber so that you can listen to this week's subscriber only episode about toxic friendships and friendships with people who are male centered. We talk about how to identify a toxic friend, how to figure out if you're the toxic friend, and how do you detach from these situations in a way that can possibly salvage the relationship? I also spill the tea a little bit about what's come about since my last post about being asked out by the doorman. And I talk about why I'm so afraid to share vulnerable content publicly. And it all goes back to one particular man. Make sure you're a subscriber so you can get all the info. Now let's get on with the episode. This is a woman. She was talking to a guy she met on a dating app. They were talking casually for a couple of weeks. They go out. Things are great. On the drive home, he tells her how much fun he had. And then I think he drops her off and he sends her another text a few hours later after he's dropped her off and says, again, he had a really good time with her and wanted to know if she'd like to see him again. So she replied pretty quickly, she said, and said yes. And then she didn't hear from him. And the next day came, and I think around midday, she said, she sent a text and said, hey, just so you know, this is my availability. And hours went by. She still didn't hear from him. The people in the comments are doing exactly what I hate. And I've talked about this many, many times. And they're basically trying to gaslight this woman into thinking this guy isn't doing anything wrong. We're not going to do that here because he is doing something wrong. What she's picking up on is a shift in a pattern. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns, right? It's pattern recognition. I talk about my pattern recognition because it's kind of off the charts because of my ADHD, but our brains are wired for that. So when something goes askew, something strays from the baseline, our brains are going to go on alert. She's having a very normal reaction here. She's noticing a shift in the pattern and she's concerned about it. So her brain is just picking up on her distress, which is just exacerbating or causing the uneasiness that she's feeling. And the men in the comments, of course, are saying, oh, you're anxiously attached, which is adorable that they even know what anxious attachment is. You're anxiously attached, or, oh my God, give the guy some breathing room. It's only been a day. No, we're not going to do that because this wasn't just a simple text of, hey, here's a funny, here's a funny meme that I saw. This was what I would consider a loaded text where he asks her very plainly, would you be interested in seeing me again? And she responds and says, yes. This is an adult man. And the key to the scenario that's very important, he's separated. He knows that she's going to be waiting for a response. Acting as though what he's doing is harmless is just, it's gaslighting and it's harmful. We have a tendency to minimize this stuff when we shouldn't because he knows what he's doing here. He knows that he's extended that invitation. He knows that he did something that would cause her to have an expectation of him. And he's intentionally not following through on it, either because he's not actually separated or because he went out on this date and really just wanted to see, do I still have it? Which is, I think, something that a lot of people, men, do on dating apps when they're newly separated or when they've just had sort of a dry spell if they're single. They go out on these dates and they engage these women because they want to see if they can get this woman interested in them. Does this woman find me attractive? And the problem with that, obviously, is that they're not valuing the other person's time. More importantly, they're really toying with somebody else's emotions. This is such a common scenario that I hear from people when I would write the dating advice column, I would get letters about this very same scenario where people would go out and they had this great date and the person they went out with said they wanted to see them again and then just disappeared. The unfortunate thing about dating apps is that it really exposes people to not just avoidance, but people who are just looking for attention, people who are just looking for an ego stroke, or people who genuinely think they're ready to date, but then once they get presented with the possibility of that, they have a reaction and realize, "Oh, I'm not ready for this." The overarching problem here is how so many people lack self-awareness. They don't know what they're looking for, what they want, what they can reasonably provide until they're put in a situation where they are expected to follow through, until they're expected to make that move. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of people on these apps, especially separated men, who are trying to get in as much, they're trying to sow as many oats as they can before they just go back to their wives. Because a lot of times people just want a separation because they're bored and they want variety. And so where do they go? Dating apps. The people in the comments of this post, they're putting the onus on the woman. They're making it seem like she's being unreasonable to have a reaction, and she's not. This man contributed to the pattern that was set early on when they first started talking. And then out of the blue, his behavior took a detour, and she has a right to say, that's strange because he's strayed from the baseline a bit. We should encourage women to pay more attention to that voice, right? Because that's our intuition telling us something's off here. Now, whether or not it's something negative requires a little bit more time. But that intuition is still a warning, and it's a warning that women should not ignore. Let's move on to the next scenario, and it's from toxic relationships on Reddit. So you know it's going to be good. So I've been best friends with this guy I met at an outing gathering about 2.5 years ago. Our friendship started out rocky, but I will leave that out for the sake of staying relevant to the story. But we remain great friends, and we have watched each other grow as individuals for the better. During this time, we have established we have feelings for one another. I can't tell if he's too scared to pursue a relationship with me because of his past traumas or if there's something else keeping us from moving forward. Anytime I bring up us potentially being something more as far as engaging in serious conversation about it, he shells up and closes me out. What made all of this more confusing is we do everything couples do, even sleeping together. I haven't brought up the discussion for a few months, but in the last week or two, I have noticed he's been more or maybe seemingly distant and short in his texts with me. We used to talk all the time, and suddenly in the last couple weeks started to fizzle for some reason, and I'm not sure why. When we hang out, it's different. We are close and attentive. He's attentive to me. I just don't know what to do. I know the advice everyone will give me is to just leave and walk away, but the problem is in the last couple of years, I've grown to love him a lot, and I've gotten my hopes up time and time again. He will change his mind and finally be ready to commit. How much longer should I wait? How much longer should I be patient? The strange thing is that every time I've tried to create distance between us, something in the universe always pushes us back together again. And it's happened on multiple occasions. Does he miss me? Is he scared? I don't know what's going on, and I don't know how to approach it anymore without coming off needy or naggy. Sometimes physical touch is always what bounces him right back, especially when he's been in a headspace when we go a long time without seeing each other. He especially gets in his head a lot too. So if anyone has any insight, maybe a man's perspective would be greatly appreciated. I know I love him, but something feels different, and I don't know if it's my anxiety talking and my mind is just playing tricks on me, or if my intuition is telling me I'm right on the money. So this sucks for her, right? Like, this guy is obviously, he knows how she feels, and he's staying in the relationship and returning back to her when it's convenient for him. I'll say this again. Men know what they're doing in situations like this. They're not oblivious to the fact that women are paying attention to their behavior and interpreting it in a certain way. This is another situation where there's a pattern and the man changes the pattern, maybe out of the blue, maybe not, and the woman's like, what's going on? Now, it sounds to me like this guy has potentially met somebody that he does want to have a relationship with, and he's pulling away in the hopes, he's detaching with love, but in a really passive aggressive and thoughtless way, because he's probably hoping that this woman, it will just pick up on the hint and she'll just move on. She says that every time she tries to break away from him, something forces them back together. And she's doing that thing that I think a lot of us do where we're kind of romanticizing and saying there's something pulling us together. It's fate, it's kismet, it's something that we have no control over. How he feels or doesn't feel about this person, I can't say for sure. What I can say is that he's not matching her energy here, and she's expending an awful lot of energy on this guy, and he's not returning it. That's one of those huge red flags that we should never ignore because whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic partner, you want a friend that matches your energy. You want a friend who invests as much into the relationship that you do. You don't want to be in any kind of relationship where you're doing all the work. To me, it sounds like this relationship has kind of run its course for him. Maybe he's met somebody. Maybe he's realizing, I can tell, has certain feelings for me that I just don't return, which, let's be clear, makes him a really shitty person because he didn't just come around and notice these feelings. Like, he most likely always knew how she felt, and he most likely always knew he was never going to be what she wanted him to be to her. He just reached his point where he was like, I don't want to do this anymore, or this is now inconvenient for me, which is, I think, the most likely scenario. To me, it sounds like this guy, took advantage of this woman's attention and affection and her body for as long as it worked for him. And then when it started becoming convenient, he started to pull away in the hopes that she would be the bad guy and break things off. What sucks is that we, the people reading this, we can look at this and say, girl, come on. But when you're in it, your brain will rationalize why you should stay. It's almost like when you're in the situation like this, you're talking to ChatGPT because we all know ChatGPT just tells us what we want to hear. And so our brain is just like, yeah, he's scared. Yeah, she's getting something is causing her to stick around and stick this out. And it sucks because we just have these blinders on when we're in these moments. We don't want to see it. And that's usually because our brain knows we are not ready for that inevitable crash. And we might even know that on some level. And that too keeps us going, keeps us in it. As counterintuitive as it sounds, we kind of need denial, right? Denial protects us to some degree. It becomes dysfunctional or maladaptive depending on how long it goes on. But in those initial stages, we kind of need it because it protects us from the overwhelm of emotion that we're going to feel when this situation, whatever it is, doesn't turn out the way we want it to. Denial is actually part of our fight or flight. I do a lot of coverage of the Idaho 4 case, and one of the surviving roommates, there's so much negativity towards her for not calling 911. And when you hear her story and when you hear her experience, it really does sound like she was in denial, like that she knew there something wasn't right, but that denial was keeping her from completely losing it. Denial is a coping mechanism. Now, to give you a little update on my personal situation, I want to say that I got a lot of really great feedback about the doorman who asked me out and about the inner conflict I have about getting male attention once I've lost, after losing weight, even though I'm the same person as I was before losing weight. And a lot of people said, maybe he was in a relationship. Maybe he just was in a bad place. Maybe he just wasn't ready. Maybe he was shy. I don't know how I feel about the last one, but the thing about maybe he was in a relationship, that's really possible. And I have to consider that there are other possibilities here. But my brain, protecting me from something dangerous, something disappointing, is going to go to that negative place. Our brains do that to protect us. So I think it's just something I'm not going to know until I give it a chance. Like I said in the beginning, this week's subscriber-only episode or subscriber-only content is about having male-centered friends and having toxic friends. How do you deal with them? How do you confront it? And how do you detach with love? And how do you determine if maybe you're the toxic friend? I also go into some private stuff about things that are going on in my life with men from my past as a result of my post from the other day and from other posts that have just sort of recently cropped up. So become a subscriber, get the tea, join the inner circle. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your support and your feedback and your messages and your TikTok comments. I'm really happy you're here. Make sure you're following me on social media at My Character Analysis on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. I've also made a YouTube channel strictly for podcast episodes and video content for this channel only, because the true crime content isn't, there's not a lot of overlap. So the new channel for this Substack only is Character Analysis Pod. It's going to be linked in the show notes. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you guys soon.